World War II was the largest and deadliest battle in human history. 19 years after the end of World War I, the world was once again haunted by the shadows of escalating tension and conflict. In 1939, the silence shattered into relentless violence like lightning in a dark night. War once again engulfed the world, shaking hearts and tearing apart fragile peace. On September 1st, 1939, as the sun rose on a peaceful morning, the world had no idea that this moment would mark the beginning of an unimaginable destruction. The German forces crossed the Polish border with full force. The attack was brutal and relentless, filling the sky with explosions and surrounding Polish cities. In just a few days, this small, peaceful country fell into ruin. The relentless German forces shattered Poland's weak defenses. Cities were reduced to rubble, and Polish people ran in fear. At the same time, the world held its breath as it watched Germany's aggression spread. News of the attack quickly reached every corner of the globe. On September 3, 1939, Britain and France, as allies of Poland, decided they could no longer stay silent. They declared war on Germany, which had unleashed an unavoidable storm. But what they didn't know was that the attack on Poland was just the beginning of a wave of destruction that would sweep across the entire world. This is the dark story of World War II. In 1939, Germany was led by the Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler. He believed that his people were a superior race destined to conquer Europe. His troops had already entered Austria and Czechoslovakia. The Second World War began when Germany launched an attack with an advance force of over 2,000 tanks, supported by nearly 900 bombers and more than 400 fighter planes. In total, Germany deployed 60 divisions and almost 1.5 million troops for the invasion. From East Prussia and Germany in the north and Silesia and Slovakia in the south, German units quickly broke through Polish defenses along the border and advanced on Warsaw in a massive encirclement attack. The German forces' relentless assault shattered Poland's weak defenses. Cities turned to rubble, and the Polish people fled in deep fear. Poland mobilized late, and political considerations forced its army into a disadvantageous deployment. The Polish army also lacked modern arms and equipment, had few armored and motorized units, and could deploy little more than 300 planes, most of which the Luftwaffe destroyed in the first few days of the invasion. Despite fighting tenaciously and inflicting serious casualties on the Germans, the Polish army was defeated within weeks. The world adopted a new term to describe Germany's successful war tactic: Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. The tactic consisted of staging a surprise attack with massive, concentrated forces of fast-moving armored units, supported by overwhelming air power.
Großen Linie. Und in diesem Augenblick marschieren gerade. Polen hat den Kampf gewählt. Und es hat den Kampf nun erhalten.
After Germany successfully occupied Poland, terror began. German forces captured an Orthodox rabbi, tied him to the roof of a wooden synagogue, and burned him alive. The German troops then decided when they would kill all the Polish people. The only option left for the residents was to defend themselves and protect their families as best as they could, even though the slaughter continued slowly.
I remember seeing the dead horses and the ruined buildings. Our house didn't have any windows left. It was the same house, but it wasn't. My mother burst crying, and she threw up when she saw everything that was happening. It was just such a shock.
We were simply overwhelmed by the German military might.
This sort of feeling developed that we were helpless. It was a feeling of being in a trap. There was no way out. I think people simply didn't want to accept it.
The Germans started the terror immediately. They brought in the Orthodox rabbi and tied him up to the roof of the wooden synagogue and started a fire and made the elders run in to try to save him. And they all died right in front of my eyes.
After conquering Poland, Hitler aimed to build a German empire by invading eastern countries. However, Britain and France had a pact with Poland, so they declared war on Germany.
Just to bring you up to date on the news of Europe, if you are just carrying on your radios, Great Britain is now at war with Germany.
After declaring war on Germany, children in Paris and London were evacuated to the countryside. Later, France and England called for help from their colonial troops in Asia and Africa.
Au monde de maîtres et d'esclaves, nous avons à sauver la liberté et la dignité humaine.
The Allied forces spread out along the Maginot Line, a series of bunkers and fortresses stretching along the German border. For 8 months, both sides watched each other from across the line. In the spring of 1940, German forces launched a surprise attack by bypassing the Maginot Line and moving through the Ardennes forest.
Nun stehen wir am Abschluss des ersten Geschehens dieses gewaltigen Kampfes. Und was die in Polen versprochen hat, wird sie in England und Frankreich
Die anderen sind ja schon nach Polen gegangen und ich wollte unbedingt noch was erleben. Ne? Ich war begeistert.
After overcoming the Maginot Line, the armoured tank troops, known as Panzers, then launched an attack on Belgium, the Netherlands and France.
Wieder ging es weiter und wir haben uns schon gewundert, dass also da kaum Gegenwehr ist.
Knowing about the invasion, the British forces deployed some very old armoured vehicles. However, these vehicles were not strong enough to withstand the German tanks' attack. With just one shot, the British tanks were instantly destroyed. Realizing the power of the Panzer forces, the British troops began retreating to the Dunkirk beaches. They were cornered by German forces and trapped with no defense. Soon after, planes appeared from the sky, swooping down, and began attacking the British soldiers. The trapped forces, unable to do anything, could only helplessly face the terrifying terror. In their desperate situation, the British troops made their final evacuation move, boarding the Allied ships. However, enemy aircraft launched low-level attacks and began ruthlessly destroying the Allied hospital ships.
Near Dunkirk this evening, Allied troops have been deliberately machine-gunned and slaughtered by low-flying aircraft. Allied hospital ships have been attacked.
You're up to your neck. Dead bodies. The slaughter.
Around 338,000 Allied troops were successfully evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk. Of this number, about 198,000 were British soldiers, while the rest included French, Belgian, and a small number of troops from other countries involved in the conflict. During the Dunkirk evacuation, the number of casualties was not as high as the number of soldiers successfully evacuated. Around 68,000 to 100,000 Allied troops, including British, French, Belgian and others, are estimated to have been killed or captured. Over the course of a few weeks of fighting, German forces killed or captured more than 2 million Allied troops. In just 21 days, the Nazis succeeded in taking over France and entering Paris, leading France to begin surrendering to Germany.
France has surrendered.
After that, in Berlin, Hitler was welcomed as a hero. The Nazi forces now controlled most of Europe, with only Great Britain standing in their way. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister in 1940, refused to bow to Hitler's threats. Now Hitler is preparing a deadly final attack. He plans a massive invasion of Great Britain, but first he needs to cripple the Royal Air Force.
Britain, alone, will continue the struggle.
Across the English Channel, German pilots gathered for their final instructions. Meanwhile, after a few Royal Air Force soldiers completed their duties, Winston Churchill told them they must fight with confidence and never give up. They had to defend their homeland, even if their lives were at stake.
We are in one of the greatest battles in history. You ask, what is our policy? It is to wage war by sea, land, and air, with all the strength that God can give us. Victory at all costs. Without victory, there is no survival. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender.
After all the British Air Force squadrons were above the thick cloud layer, they could finally see the enemy, and the shooting began. The Battle of the Air Force lasted for 12 weeks. By September, a total of 1,600 German planes had been shot down. Due to the heavy losses on the German side, all missions had to be cancelled, bringing the Battle of Britain to an end. As a result, Britain was freed from the threat of invasion. Hitler wasn't the only dictator casting a shadow over Europe. Italy had its own ruler, Benito Mussolini. Mussolini planned an alliance with Hitler and prepared his own military forces.
Siamo in campo contro le democrazie dell'Occidente. Corri alle armi e dimostra la tua tenacia, il tuo coraggio. Il tuo valore!
While England was still busy fighting Germany, Benito took advantage of the opportunity to invade Egypt, which was a British colony. Meanwhile, in Europe, thousands of Allied soldiers had become prisoners of war, including Pham Van Khiem, a Vietnamese soldier serving in the French army. Then the Nazi soldiers started to separate the colonial soldiers from the other prisoners of war. After shaving their heads, all the prisoners were given identification numbers. However, the prisoners didn't understand the reason behind these numbers. It turned out that the Nazis were conducting what they called medical research to advance their racist beliefs. And this was just the beginning. Then let's head to Warsaw, the capital of Poland, which was under occupation at the time. There, the Jewish population was isolated in an area known as the Jewish Village. A young boy named Julian Kulski, who was only 13 years old, was determined to fight against the German forces. Because of this, he decided to join the Polish resistance. At first, Julian was only responsible for delivering messages through secret underground routes. However, his commander later taught him how to use weapons and how to kill with a knife or bare hands. After studying attack techniques, Julian prepared to resist the invaders. However, their operation was discovered by the Nazis, and the commander of the Polish resistance forces was captured and immediately executed. Seeing their commander killed, Julian and some of the other kids became even angrier and started searching for German soldiers in the city center. They encountered one of the German soldiers and immediately took him down. This was the first time Julian Kulski had ever killed someone. The next day, after the death of the German soldier was discovered, the Nazi troops began a massacre in retaliation. They killed 20 women and children in revenge for the death of one of their soldiers.
I feel responsible for the death of these poor people.
In the Jewish village, Jewish people were gathered and forced to be taken to camps built by the Germans. The Nazis also had plans for the remaining Polish people after that. A few days later, the SS troops arrived. The SS was an elite Nazi unit made up of members from the Schutzstaffel, the most feared guard of Hitler across Europe. Schutzstaffel is often shortened to SS troops. Based on the statement from a Polish civilian named Alojzy Twardecki, he revealed that children were taken to a certain place because food in Poland was very scarce. Therefore, the SS troops placed the children into train cars marked "Polish children will be cared for in the Empire." This is Alojzy Twardecki testimony.
Eines Nachts kam ein Trupp SS-Leute. Man erzählte den Müttern, da es sehr schlecht mit den Lebensmitteln für Polen bestellt war, Sie wissen, dass man die Kinder aufpäppeln wollte und ins Reich bringen wollte, in so ein Kinderlager. Weiß ich noch, auf einmal befand ich mich, und die Kinder wurden dann ihnen aus den Armen gerissen und in die Züge. Wobei auf den Waggons stand, polnische Kinder zur Ernährung ins Reich.
Alojzy Twardecki was one of the 20,000 Polish children kidnapped by the SS during that time. When these children reached their teenage years, Hitler forced them to become German soldiers and fight in the war.
Deutsche Jugend, wir wollen ein Volk sein. Und ihr, meine Jugend, soll dieses Volk nun werden. Denn ihr seid Fleisch, von unserem Fleisch und Blut, von unserem Blut. Und in euren jungen Gehirn brennt dasselbe Geist, der unten herrscht. Vor uns liegt Deutschland, in uns marschiert Deutschland und hinter uns kommt Deutschland.
Hitler's ambitions are now clear. He aims to create an empire that will last for 1,000 years, meant for a superior race. After making preparations, Germany has launched a new phase of military terror, attacking England by bombing its cities.
German aircraft carried out a number of attacks on Great Britain last night. The raid was scattered over many parts of the country.
Meanwhile, Italian fascists invaded their neighbor, Greece.
Troops are moving forward on all fronts after breaking through the weak Greek resistance.
While war is spreading outside Europe, Japan is on a mission to establish a new order in Asia. They are already at war with China. And now Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy and Imperial Japan have come together to form a powerful new alliance known as the Axis powers. Their goal is to dominate the world. But there is one force they need to reckon with, the Soviet Union, which boasts the largest army in the world. Behind this immense power stands a dictator, Joseph Stalin, whose ambitions rival those of Hitler. In 1940, Europe witnessed a blazing war. By 1941, the flames of this conflict spread across the globe, with Japan launching an aerial attack on Pearl Harbor. This documentary will continue.
From the NBC Newsroom in New York. President Roosevelt said that the Japanese have attacked the Pearl Harbor from the air. I'll repeat that. President Roosevelt says that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii from the air.